So this is the Jupyter Notebook, and we'll be performing all of the Python commands over here. Now, the very first step in any programming language would be to use the print statement and print something onto the console. So here, let me just use the print statement, and here I shall write, I love Python. And let me just execute this. And as you see, we have executed our very first piece of code in Python. Now, going ahead, we'll understand the concept of variables and data types in Python. So whenever we are working with any programming language, we are basically dealing with data, and we'd have to store this data somewhere. And this is where variables come in. So here I'll just add a comment, and I'll add this comment called as variables. Now here I am creating a variable called as var1, and in this I'll store the value 10. Let me print out var1 over here, and you see I'm able to print out 10. Similarly, what I'll do is now instead of 10 I'll store a string value. Let's say I write down over here scalar. Now let me again print out var1 over here. Again, you are seeing that I'm able to print out scalar. Similarly, let me actually store a boolean value inside this, var1, and inside this I'll store true. Now let me print out var1 for you guys, and as you see, what I'm doing over here is I am storing different types of data in this variable, and I am printing out that variable. So this is how variables and data types work. Going ahead, we shall work with operators in Python, so let me also add a comment for that. Now, we have basic operators. We've got arithmetic operators, logical operators, and then we have conditional operators. So let me just write down arithmetic operators over here. Going ahead, what I'll do is I'll just have two variables, A and B. In A, I'll store the value 100, and in B, I'll store the value 200. Now that we have both of these, what I want to do is I'll just perform the basic operations. So when I have A plus B, you shall see that I've printed out 300. Similarly, when I have A minus B, you shall see that I've printed out minus 100. Now, when I have A star B, which is basically I'm multiplying these two numbers, I have this is 20,000. And then when I have A divided by B, I have 0.5 because 100 by 200 is 0.5. Next up, I have relational operators. Let me also put down a comment for that. Let me write down relational operators. And here, now let me have the value of 50 in A, and in B, I'll store the value 75. What I'll do is I'll just compare these two values. So let's say if I write down A is less than B, I'm basically checking if the value which is present in A is less than the value which is present in B. And this is true. Similarly, if I put over here B is greater than A, I get the same thing. Now let me actually change this. So let's say if I have A greater than B, here I have false because 50 is not greater than 75. So these are some basic relational operators. And then we have conditional operators. So let me write down conditional operators over here. And in conditional operators, we've got the AND operator, the OR operator. Now, for you folks to understand, the AND operator gives you a true result when both of the operands are true. The OR operator gives you a true result when any of the operand is true. Now, to give you examples, again, I'll have A. In A, I'll store the value true. Then I'll have B, and in B, I'll store the value false. So now that I have these two values, what I want to do is, let me just show you A and B, I'll get false. B and A, I'll get false. The only case where I'll get a true with respect to AND operator is A and A, because both of them are true. But on the other hand, when I work with the OR operator, so let me write down A or, let me check where is the OR symbol. So A or B, I get a true. Similarly, B or A, again I get a true. The only case where I get a false is when both of them are false. So when I write down B or B, this is when I get a false. So these were operators. Going ahead, I shall work with the basic data structures in Python. And when I say data structures in Python, I have certain data structures called as tuple, list, set, and dictionary. So we'll start off with the most basic one, which is tuple. So when it comes to variables, we can only store one value at a time. But let's say if I want to store multiple values at a time, then we can use all of these different data structures. So when it comes to tuple, So in tuple, we can store multiple elements, and the interesting part about a tuple is it is immutable, which would mean that once you create a tuple, you cannot change the values which goes inside it. So here what I'll do is I'll create a tuple called as t1, and inside this I'll just pass in some values. And if you'd have to create a tuple, you'd have to create that by using these round braces. So here I shall just give in 1 a true. I shall write t1, and as you see, I am able to create this tuple. And if I want to check the type of it, just to see if it is a tuple or not, I'll use type. Inside that I'll pass in t1, and as you see, this is a tuple. And if I want to extract some individual elements out of this, let's say if I want to extract the first element which is present. So in Python, you'd have to remember that indexing starts from 0. So when I have t1 of 0, I'll be able to extract the first element. Next up, we have a list. So the difference between a tuple and a list is a tuple is immutable, a list is mutable. So I'll give you an example. So let's say the value which is present over here, if I want to change it, that would not be possible. So if I have t1 of 0 is equal to 100, I'll get an error. And this is because once I create a tuple, I cannot change it. Now let me go ahead and create a list. So to create a list, I'll be using square braces. Again, inside this, what I'll do is I'll write down 2b, and I'll have false over here. Now let me print out L1 for you guys, and let me also show you the type of it. So type of L1, and you shall see that this is a list. So going ahead, since I've told you guys that this is mutable, so L1 at index number 0, I initially have the value of 2. I would want to change it to 200. Now let me print out L1 for you guys, and as you see, initially the value was 2. Now I have changed it to 200. This is a list. Going ahead, we have another data structure called as a dictionary. So let me write down dictionary over here, and with the help of dictionary, you can store key value pairs. So let me just show you how that works. So I'll write down d1 is equal to, and I'll give curly braces over here. So I have a key, which I'll give as k1, and then I'll give a value which will be 10. Then I have another key, I shall give it as k2, and then I'll give it a value, and I'll give the value to be equal to 20. And here, as you see, the keys and values are separated with this colon. Now let me print out d1 over here, and let me also check the type of it. So type of d1, you shall see that this is dict, which would mean that this is a dictionary. So if I want to individually extract the keys and values from this, I shall show you how it's done. So I shall just write down d1 dot keys, and I've extracted the keys which are k1 and k2. Similarly, if I write down d1 dot values, I've extracted the values which are 10 and 20. So this is a dictionary. Now going ahead, I want to create a set. So I'll have this comment set, and in a set, you can store only unique values. So let's say if I have S1, I call it a set. And again, if I have to create a set, I'll use these curly braces. So let's say when I given these duplicate values like these, and when I hit enter, now when I print out S1, you shall see that I only have the unique values. So here 1, 2 and 3 are being repeated, but in the final result, I only have the unique values. This is how a set works. So these were all the different data structures in Python. Now going ahead, we'll work with certain flow control statements. So flow control statements, we've got conditional statements and looping statements. In conditional statements, we've got if else. So I'll just give you an example of if and else. So I'll write down if else over here, and I'll give a condition over here. So let's say I have A is equal to 100, B is equal to 200. Now I'll give a condition. If A is less than B, and when you hit enter, you have to take care of the spacing. So if you don't give in the spacing properly, you'll get an error. So if A is less than B, what I'd want to do, I'd want to print out A is less than B. So here, since this condition is true, since 100 is less than 200, this condition has been evaluated to true, and I've printed this. But on the other hand, let's say if this condition is false. So here, let's say if I'm checking if A is greater than B, then this condition is false. Since this condition is false, I'll not enter this if statement, and I'll skip whatever is over here. But let's say, even if it is false, I want to print something. So here what I'll do is I'll add else. So if this is false, then what I do want to do is I do want to print out A is not greater than B. So here, as you see, since this condition has failed, I'm skipping this. I go to else and I print out A is not greater than B. So now we'll be working with looping statements, and in looping statements we've got while. So here I'll just add this comment of while, and so here what I'll do is I'll have a variable called as n and I'll store the value 1, and after this I'll write down while n is less than or equal to 5. I would want to print out something. What would I want to print out? I would just want to print out n, but I would also need a condition over here. So here what I'll do is I'll write down n is equal to n plus 1. Now when I execute this, you shall see that I get the result 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So here what is happening in this while loop is initially the value of n is equal to 1. So here I am checking if n is less than or equal to 5. So is 1 less than 5? Yes, it is true. Since it is true, I enter this loop, I print out 1, then I increment the value of n. Now n becomes 2. Again, I check the condition if 2 is less than or equal to 5. Since it is true, I enter the loop and I increment the value of n. So now n becomes 2, I print it out. Again, I go back. Again, what happens is n becomes 3. Again, so this way I am keeping on printing the value of n. So finally, when n becomes 6, that is when I exit the loop because the condition fails. Now we'll work with functions in Python. So let me just add functions over here. So with the help of functions, we can basically create different modules of small sizes. So let's say if I do want to create something which I want to call again and again. So for that purpose, I can use a function. So let's say if I want to add 10 again and again. So what I want to do is I can just create a function which will just add 10 to whatever number I pass in. So to create a method, we have this keyword called as def. And after def, I need to give in the function name. So let me give in the function name. So the function name over here, let me just write it as add 10. And here, let me just pass in a parameter. And what this basically does is this prints out x plus 10. So what I've done over here is I have created a method or a function called as add 10, and it would print out by adding 10 to it. Now that I've created this method or defined this method, let me go ahead and call it. So I'll write down add 10, and inside this, let me pass in the value 50. And as you see, when I pass in 50, I get the value 60. Similarly, add 10, when I pass in 71 over here, I get the result 81. So as you see, whenever I'm passing in a value, I get plus 10 over here. So this is functions. Now let's learn about object-oriented programming. So in object-oriented programming, we have classes and objects. So let me just add a comment called as class over here. And to create a class in Python, I need to write class. Obviously, this is very intuitive. So what I want to do is I want to create a class called as student. And this will have certain things inside it. Let's say I want to add in the name of the student, and let's say the student marks. So here I'll create a method called as get name. And here, whenever we are creating a student class and we have a method inside it, we need to have one parameter by default, which is called as self. And then let's say I have another parameter over here, which is n. Now what I shall do is I shall write down self dot name is equal to n. So basically the student class will have a variable called as name, and this parameter goes inside that. And now let me go ahead and create another method over here. So again, since this is a method, I need to write down def. Now going ahead, let me go ahead and create another method which shall take in the marks. So I shall write down get marks over here. I shall write self m, and again here I shall write self dot marks is equal to m, and this would be it. So I have two methods over here through which I'm taking the name of the student and the marks of the student. Now after this, I would need two more methods where I can print out the name of the student and the marks of the student. So here I shall write def put name, and this will only have self because I'm not really initializing anything or storing anything. And after this, I need to print out name of student is. Here I shall write self dot name. Then I need another method over here, and I shall call that method as put marks. Here again I shall have self. Again I shall use the print statement over here. Inside this I shall write down marks of students are here. Let me write in self dot marks. So I've successfully created this student class. Now what I want to do is I want to create an object out of it. So here I shall write S1 is equal to student, and let me actually, so by default whenever we are creating a class, the first letter has to be capital. So let me make this capital, let me run this again, and here let me make the S capital again and run this. So I've created an object of this class. Now if I want to assign the values to the name and marks, I need to call this method. So here I can call the method through this object. So here I shall write s1 dot get name, and the name of the student I shall keep it as Rajat. Then I also need to store the marks. So here I shall write s1 dot get marks, and inside marks, let's say Rajat has scored 98 marks. I shall pass in those. Now that I have stored the values, I need to print them out. So here I will have s1 dot put marks, and here I actually have an error. So what I'll do is I'll actually pass this as well as string, and now when I run this I will get the result s1 dot, let me run this again, and also let me run this again, and as you see marks of student are 98. Similarly, now when I have s1 dot, I need to call put name, and let me also call this, and as you see name of student is Rajat. So this is how with the help of the method we've been able to store the name of the student, marks of the student, and also we've been able to print it out. Now going ahead, we'll work with certain libraries in Python. So we have a library called as Pandas, with the help of which we can perform data manipulation, and then we have a library called as Matplotlib, with the help of which we can perform visualization. So here I'll write down this command called as pandas, and let me go ahead and import this library. So here I shall have import pandas as pd. So pandas is the library, and I'm invoking it with this alias called as pd. And now with the help of this I can work with different tabular columns, and tabular columns are basically the data frames in Python. And whenever we are working with data frames, you can do a lot of data wrangling or data manipulation on top of that. So I have a file called as iris. Let me go ahead and load that file. So here I shall have pd.read_csv, and if I want to load a file, this is the command I shall be using, pd.read_csv. Inside that I'll give in the name of the file. Now let me go ahead and store it in a new object, and I'll call it as iris. Now if I want to have a glance at the first few records of this data frame, I'll have iris.head, and as you see these are all of the different records which are present over here. So now that I have this, let's say if I want to extract only one particular column from this entire data frame, what I'd want to do is I'd want to give in the name of the data frame first, which is iris. Then I'll give in two braces, which is parenthesis, and inside this I'll give in the name of the column. So let's say if I want to extract only sepal length, I will give in the name of the column over here, sepal length, and let me just go ahead and store it in a new object and call it as iris_sl. Now let me show you the head of this, iris_sl dot head. And as you see, from this entire data frame, I've been able to extract only this particular column. Similarly, let's say if I want to extract two columns, let's say if I want to extract the sepal width and the petal width columns from this entire data frame, let me show you how it's done. Again, I'll write down iris. I'll give in two parentheses over here. Then I need to give in sepal_width. So I'll have sepal_width. Then let me give in another column, which is petal_width. And this I'll go ahead and store in a new object, and I'll call that object as iris let's say width. Now let me print out the head of this, iris underscore width dot head, and when I print this out, you will see that from this entire data frame, I've been able to print out only two columns, which is sepal width and petal width. Similarly, let's say from this entire data frame, if I want to extract only those records where the sepal length value is greater than 6. That is also something which I can do. So here, first I'll give in iris, which is the name of the data frame. Inside this, again, I'll have iris, and here I'll give in the condition. So the condition is sepal length. Let me write this down properly. So sepal length has to be greater than 6. So wherever this condition is true, I'm extracting all of those records. Let me store this in iris new condition, and let me print this out for you guys. Iris new condition dot head, and if you look at this particular column, you shall see that all of the values which are present over here, they are greater than 6. So this is about pandas. Now we'll go ahead and work with this library called as Matplotlib, and with the help of Matplotlib we can perform visualization. So here I shall write down Matplotlib, and one of the simplest visualizations that you can create with Matplotlib is a simple line plot. So for that line plot, let me create two variables. I'll have one variable called as x, and then x, let me add in some values. I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'll have y. Inside y, let me just store, let's say 5, 4, 3, let me have 2 and 1. So now that I have these two lists ready, what I want to do is, if I want to make a simple line plot, I'll just have plt.plot, and I shall pass x and y, and to print it out, I'll have plt.show. So here I actually have to import the Matplotlib library, and that is why I have this error over here. So what I shall do is, here after this particular line, I shall write down from Matplotlib import pyplot as plt. Now let me run all of these, and as you see, I've been able to create this simple line plot. And here, as you see, as the value of x increases, the value of y decreases. Now, if I want to change something inside this, let's say if I want to add a title, that is something which I can do. So here, let me just add a line called as plt.title, and here I shall write my first line plot. And as you see, I have added this line plot. Similarly, let's say if I want to change the color of this line, so I'll go here, plt.plot, I'll add this parameter called as color, and I'll give an R which signifies red. Now let me run this, and as you see, I've been able to change the color of this line from blue to red. Going ahead, we also have another visualization library which is called as Seaborn. So for that purpose, let me write down import Seaborn as SNS, and here what I shall do is, let's say if I want to again create a simple line plot. Now what I want to do is, I already have x and y, so for this I shall write down SNS dot line plot, and x is equal to x, y is equal to y. Now let me just go ahead and run this, and this is what I have. But there are more intuitive ways to work with this Seaborn library. So let's say I have a library, or I have a data set inside Seaborn. So let me just go ahead and load that data set. So sns.load data set, and inside this I would have a data set called as fMRI, and these are all of the records which are present inside it. Now what I want to do is, I would want to create a line plot between two particular columns, and those two particular columns would be, let's say I want to map this time point on the x-axis and this signal on the y-axis. So here I shall write down sns.line plot. X I shall have time point, and on y, let me just go ahead and map signal. And both of these are coming from this object called as fMRI. Now let me run this. Time point is not defined, so I'd have to put both of these column names inside double quotes over here. Now let me just go ahead and run this again. fMRI is not defined, so I'd actually have to store this in a new object. So let me write down fMRI. Now let me run this over here, and as you see, I have been able to successfully create this line plot. So folks, we have covered all of the major concepts of Python in this short and crisp video. If you find this session insightful, please do like the video and also subscribe to our channel. And if you have any queries, put them up in the comment section. We will definitely take them up. So thank you very much, and let's meet in the next one.